I'm ready, John. Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are you this afternoon? I'm George Moss, the host of the program here called What's Going On allpointstv.com. And we are, as always, very glad to have you with us, because without you, there will be no us, no purpose of coming in if we can't get you to tune us in. And we come in every Monday from 2 o'clock until 3, and every second and fourth Mondays we have our program precedes the program called Satori's Black History Corner that comes on around 3:30 and stays around for about 30 minutes. And it is a very marquee program that we have here. But all the programs here at this studio are quality programs. I want you to tune us in and put us in your schedule. We know you're very busy, but our schedule is one, we can accommodate yours by being available 24 hours a day, and you can tune us in whenever it is your pleasure to do so, because we are up and running and we tape these programs for your use, and you can tune us in at your convenience. Well, we are here heading toward, we just left Christmas, so I hope all of you had a Merry Christmas. And we're now getting ready for the rest of the holidays. I guess we can say now Happy Holidays, but I like to say Merry Christmas before Christmas comes up, because that's a special holiday. So we do say Merry Christmas around here at the studio. And we're heading, what is it now, a couple of days before the first. And I hope everybody's getting ready for what I'm getting ready for. I don't watch a lot of sports, but I do watch the major sports that go on. And this year, as you know, we have the first time we're going to find out who really are who really is the championship football team, because we have the playoffs for the first time. And so no computers is going to interfere with what we will find out at the end on the 12th of next month, when they have the final game. And it is really great to have the players deciding it, and not some machine that knows all and can put this in there and that in there. You know, you put things in, you get something out. And if you don't put the right data in there, you won't get the right outcome. And there are so many variables that can only be manifested on the field. And so we're going to find out this year who is the real champion. I'm going to really be seeing myself if what they're saying about the champion is the one that comes out on top. Now, they're saying that Alabama's number 1 and Florida State's number 2. I'm going to see if that really plays out at the end. And I do have my breakfast on the Ducks in the game with Florida State. So we'll see how that comes out, and if not, I have to hear my friend's mouth as he tells me that I should stop betting him, because every time I bet him, I lose. I can't win for losing. But maybe in this, I think I got a pretty good bet here, although Florida State's number 2 right now, and they got the Ducks number 3. But I think the point spread is favoring. And I've been watching Florida State this year, and they've been coming from behind all season long. In the fourth quarter, with only a few minutes left, they come from back, and they're doing great things at the end of the game. I don't think they're going to be that close in terms of this game, and if they got if they're trailing, got to catch up. That might be a problem against the Ducks, because these guys score a lot of points. So that's my spiel on that, and hope you will, have your new year starting off right. And I'm going to enjoy mine. I had a great Christmas. And we had some of the best food that I've had in a long time. We don't cook every day around my house, but we did it up this time. And I had a Merry Christmas, and I'm going to have a wonderful 2015, because I'm predicting great things, not from Washington, but great things from the people who are paying attention to what we do here at allpointstv.com and also on Facebook. Today, before I came to the studio, I posted, as I always do before I come to the studio, I try to post my article on Facebook so that we can have an interfacing of what we write and what we're talking about on the network. And I did a post. Sometimes I sit at the computer typing my article out, and I have an intent to go one way, and I end up going in a whole different direction by the time I start getting into the substance of my article. And this was no exception. I was going to make some points around what Thomas Sowell wrote, and I did start out talking about his article he put out in 2013. where he's talking about who are the races. And he was making the point that the paradigm has been changed, and I would agree with him that the paradigm has been changed. He was saying that he said, I'm old enough to remember when most of the racism in this country was being promoted by whites. And the assumption was then in that statement that that is no longer the case today. And I testified to the conclusion that he drew, although it's implicit in what he said, that is absolutely true. If you look at what is happening right now, the ones who are actually carrying the racist banner are the ones who at one time stood up against resolutely being judged by the color of their skin, which prompted Martin Luther King to go to Washington on the 28th of August, 1963, and call for a nation to live in a nation where it would not be judged by the color of the skin, but by the content of the character. And after that had really taken place, mainly because Democrats stopped discriminating against blacks, blacks changed their mind. And those that did not change their minds, I will give you one of the names, Clarence Thomas, for example. Everybody's mad at him because he kept the faith, as we say, and kept the eyes on the prize, which you also say, and believed that we shall overcome, and absolutely believed in the end we had overcome when they passed the Civil Rights Act of 1965. And so, since he's a true believer, Eric Hoffa's true believer, and maintained the thrust of the civil rights movement, now everybody's mad at him because he maintained the civil rights vision.
By the way, you made a reference to Eric Hoffa. Did you ever read that book, True Believer?
I sure did.
That's a good book.
Excellent book.
And what's really unique about him is that he was not a college educated, yet he was allowed to teach at the college, the University of California. So I thought that was I taught at Berkeley, I guess.
Yes.
And he wrote some great, because I guess he was blind. He had like some kind of form of blindness. He was like 14 years old, and then he got his eyesight back. Started reading everything. He could read in German as well. And he's amazing. He was an amazing kind of character in his own right. But that is a great book.
Yeah, give me that scholar all the time. I like to have those out of the box thinkers. And you don't need a degree from some university in order to think out of the box or think for yourself. Sometimes you're in those classrooms, and what is happening is that they're framing your point of reference, and your lens becomes narrow. You're not able to think in more expansive terms. And you're right. Eric Hoffa was a longshoreman, and I think that background is what solidifies him and what he was writing about, because his thinking was above what you normally look at as being where the pale is above the pale. And his book called The True Believer is a classic work. And those who have not read that will do yourselves wonders if you read that book.
And what I like about it too, it's relatively free of jargon, and like the sociological jargon that weighs down, something a scholar or academic would write typically. I mean, it's just very matter-of-factly, very plain-spokenly written. I like that book. I came across it about 25 years ago.
It's been out for a while. I read that book. I think it must have been. It was more recent than that. I think maybe about 20 years ago. Now that you mention that, but I was really, I guess, because I've seen so many of the persons that he was writing about, in terms of those who are quote unquote the true believers, and sometimes you see that in terms of how the person that is a true believer believes more in what is being said than the person who's actually saying it. And you see that how many times. I think that's in fact, I wrote about that, I think, 2 days ago when I was writing about Malcolm X.
I got a leftist to actually admit, though, one time in a conversation on Facebook or something, that the left needs heroes more. They have to mythologize their leadership more often. And it's, let's face it, let's be honest, it's hard to do that for us right-wingers, because we have a standard that says you got to meet. And when they fail it, we have a tendency to shoot our wounded, okay? Yeah. And where the left is steadfastly, see, they don't have religious faith, they have a faith in humans, which I think is misplaced most often, but they need this. They need heroes more than the people on the right. The right, they always say, well, yeah, I've seen your Call the Personality with Ronald Reagan. I know only a couple of Republicans who adore, Reagan. The rest of them, like, I swear to God, you walk into some Democrat around here, you go to some of the older ones, homes, they actually have on their wall, like the triptychs, the two Kennedy brothers and Martin Luther King. And which is, Martin Luther King actually wasn't a Democrat, but I mean, they have these candles glowing in front of them and all this. I mean, they have this hero worship going on. They're the ones that fall more to the prey of cult of personality than the people on the conservatives on the right do.
Yeah, I think on the left you have a whole different schemata taking place over there in terms of how the thinking is framed around these ideologies, most of which have been proven false in the past, and yet they won't give up on them because they believe that it's the personalities and not the ideology itself that's causing the downward movement of that which they're trying to bring into existence, which has never really happened, and at some point becomes pathological. But I was saying, for example, about the true believer. You see that in terms of people like Malcolm X. I think Malcolm X is categorically one of the true believers that believed in his mentor, Elijah Muhammad, more than Elijah Muhammad believed in himself. And that's a point that Malcolm X made himself later on when he said that he believed in Elijah Muhammad more than Muhammad believed in him, than he believed in himself. And sometimes it's like that, but what's that song in the Weird say? It says, believe in yourself, then there's nothing that you can't do. You have to believe ultimately in your own ability. Certainly you can get wisdom from a lot of different places, but in the final analysis, you're going to be the one that's called to trial to put those things into practice for yourself. Nobody's going to be able to save you if you're not willing to save yourself. And we see that in all kinds of dispensations of life where people are out there out in the middle of the water, for example, fending for their life, and they're up here fighting against the guy trying to save them and bringing him down. And eventually he has to let the person go because the person not helping to save himself. He can't do it all by himself if you're fighting against the wind. And it's incumbent upon the individual. And I think on the left, they don't get that. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time with them trying to get them to get there because I'm for, the ones that can get in that boat need to get in the boat. Not everybody going to get in the boat, by the way. And I don't believe that you can change everybody's mind through being more logical and reasoning in your thought if they're not ready to hear what some Eric Hoffa type persons are saying and not even willing to pick up and read what they're saying. They can't be saved, and there's nothing you can do about that.
I don't know if I ever asked you this, and you've read a lot too, so I mean, I read the quote one time, and I thought it was John Adams that said it, but my friend researched, and you can't find where it came from. But the quote basically says, I'm kind of paraphrasing, but the intent's pretty much the same as I thought that you came across in the original writing. But it says that form of government, which does not take account how human nature functions, is bound to be abortive. And that's what leftists always want. They always want this idealistic plane. They know it's impossible. They always I've heard it so many times at college campuses. The problem with communism is it's never been implemented the way it's supposed to be. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has been done exactly the way it's been implemented. It fails miserably, and they just seem to. What I have a problem with the left is they have a tendency to think of humans as nothing more than fuel for their fires. Mm-hmm. Basically, they throw another core stack in. That's what they have a tendency to do.
And John, the left is there's a pathological problem on display on the left, and that problem goes back, in terms of the writing of it, it goes back to 1848. But the application of it, I think, would probably start somewhere around 1917 when the Bolsheviks, do you agree, John, the Bolsheviks were the ones that were putting that in place? But I think when the Bolsheviks came in, I think the writings of Karl Marx was the foundational point of V.I. Lenin and some of the others.
Well, yeah, they were definitely weren't. I mean, yeah, and they always say the left they went astray, and Trotsky was the one who was on right, and he's the one that understood they betrayed the cause and all that. Nevertheless, I mean, I look at the constitutional guys, the guys that started our Constitution, wrote it, who looked at our revolutionary leaders. Mm-hmm. They weren't so eager to shed blood as these guys. They did everything they could to address their issues with England in a proper manner. Mm-hmm. The left media goes to the high alert, kill people, round people up, put them up. That's what they do. Yeah. And I mean, they're at the core, they're anti-human. Mm-hmm. They think they're being more humanistic by trying to have this thing of equality. But they in themselves can't. They don't look around and see where there is no equality in the real world. You have to strive for liberty and artificially impose barriers. But they want everybody to be the same, and that goes against nature in itself, in my opinion.
It's unbelievable that that concept can even exist anywhere, because you have all the proof that invalidates the claim. Our revolution here in this country differs from that in France. I think the best I read on that was the book put out by Ann Coulter. Her book called, is it Mugged? No, that's the one. The book called Mugged is Racial Demagoguery from the 1970s to Obama. I'm not talking about that book. I'm talking about Demonic, which is her book prior to that one. And in reading these two books, and reading the one called Demonic in particular, she has a chapter in there where she deals, first of all, with the American Revolution. And she makes a point that when that revolution had run its course, nobody did any retribution in terms of going across the land and requiring blood of those who did not join in the revolutionary battle against the British. There was no retribution. But look at what happened in those that would copy some of the foundational principles of this revolution, which took off in France in 1789. And when that revolution went on there, you look at Robespierre, for example, one of the persons that headed the revolution, who lost his head during that time period. And then look at King Louis XV and Aunt Marie Antoinette, both of whom were beheaded. And that did not happen here. There was nobody going around and beheading anybody in the American Revolution. And that's a whole different thing here. You wonder why the framers are not admired, and why we're admiring all these people who were butchers or led to the butchery and savagery of people once they tried out those ideas. Look in history at these people. The number of persons that have been killed by people following Karl Marx's idea. Look at the ones that died under Stalin, for example. Or you look at the ones that died under Mao. Mao came out of those mountains in 1949, and during his 27 years of savagery, estimates are that 60 million people lost their lives. Now, not all of them through the sword, but because Mao would not give up on his idea that those economic plans he was putting in place wouldn't work. You can continue those 5-year plans until the cows come home, but the idea is not going to work. We wouldn't give up on the ideas. And it took Mao Zedong's death in order for China to make a turn. And now we're reading something that could have happened back in that time period. We're reading it right now where they're saying that China has the first largest economy in the world right now, has topped the economy of the United States. That would never happen under Mao, because Mao was one of those persons that he did not want to be confused with the facts. And the fact is that does not work. You have to incentivize effort. And if you don't incentivize effort, and you are the true believer in an idea that Eric Hoffer was talking about, you won't give the idea up no matter what, then you can't be helped. And I was saying Malcolm went down that road and finally had to come to a stop sign that said that he had gone down the wrong road. And I give him credit for that, because he was there 12 years under that instruction, and it took his eyes being opened, the veils coming from his eyes, by the way he was treated by those that he had all his confidence in. And he would later on say what I'm saying here, and that is, you have to put your faith in yourself. It doesn't mean you can't take some information from others, but to put your trust in other people as if they're going to save you is madness. And the left is not going to learn that. I'm not going to spend the time trying to teach it to them.
You see that's so apparent, though. If you have any criticisms towards Obama, if you're not labeled a racist, then these people look at you with vacuumed eyes if you try to bring out any points that's totally escaping the idea, or not talking about the idea of race, about why Obama's plans don't work, because simply they've been tried before by somebody else and they failed. They keep on thinking they're going to force that square peg into the round hole or something. I don't understand them. I don't understand them. They're supposed to be more rational. They pride themselves on, if you listen to NPR, they're supposed to be more intelligent and they're right. Yet they constantly push for things that are just bizarre and don't work. And that's their hallmark. That's their trademark.
There's no evidence really of any trademark ideas on the left, and they can take all the bows they want to, but What the left tries to do is hide what it actually stands for. That's why you have all these politicians on the left that's talking about who hates what group. And when it comes down to them telling the people what they stand for, they are very reticent. In fact, they don't even get into any discourse about what it is they stand for, because if they came behind the mask, people would be horrified about what the left believes in. So you don't hear them talking about a lot about their ideas. In the it didn't work this last time, and I don't know if they're going to try it in 2016. But in the last election, November the 4th of this year, you had the left trying this old narrative of the Republicans hate women, the Republicans hate blacks, and all of that, and the people went to the polls and rejected that narrative. And it'll be interesting to see what they do in 2016, but that narrative seems to have been one, it no longer has a welcome mat in front of the polls where you go in there and vote that nonsense. They're going to come behind that mask and say what they stand for. And you were talking about Obama, John. That's what Obama has had to do now, because he couldn't hide behind that mask forever. This man masked himself. He was disguised for the first, I would say at least for the first 4 years, and probably for the first 6. We're going into the 7th year right now, but Obama was masked. And we know that disguise was in fact by design, because look at what this guy did during the campaign. All of the things we're seeing right now doesn't match in any way, shape, or form the Obama that we're seeing in office right now. This is like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I mean, it's like two different people here, but they're really merged in the same personality, and that could not be that much of a change, which is 180 degrees away from the Obama that campaigned for president and the Obama that is actually sitting in the office right now, particularly in matters of race, is like two different individuals. But that's the cleverness that this man had in running his campaign. And I'll tell you why he was doing that. He was doing it because he knew the Obama that he was, and the one that he hid from the public, was an Obama that could not be elected in this country. In fact, I will say this, and nobody said this before, but I'll say it here, and that is that if Obama really believed this country was as racist as he now makes it out to be, with everything being about race with this president, he would never have dared throw his hat in the ring in 2008. In fact, he had thrown his hat in the ring February the 10th, 2007, and he would never have done that knowing that Hillary Clinton was the odds-on favorite to be the nominee of the Democratic Party and was going to be the first non-white male, quote-unquote, because there have been some blacks in disguise then president of this country, including Warren G. Harding in 1920, and some of the others as well that I don't need to mention. You can go read it for yourself in several books that are out, one of which is Jay Rogers' book called The Five Negro Presidents, and Dr. Offset Kufu's book called The Six Black Presidents. Or you can even go with William Clinton, the first black president. Yes, that's where you want to start. But Obama would never have thrown his hat in the ring if he had believed the country is as racist as he is now saying it is, because look at what he did in throwing his hat in the ring when he went up there on the State House steps, the old State House building in Springfield, Illinois, where Lincoln had given a speech during the time that he was getting ready to debate Stephen Douglas. That was not part of the debate there. He went there at a separate time. They claimed 9 debates. Really, it was just 7 debates between the two of them. But he and Stephen Douglas had gone into Springfield at different times, and so it's not a debate at that point, nor another city they went into. But there were 9 cities they went into altogether, but they went into 7 of them together, and they had a debate in those 7 cases. Well, Obama went on the steps there and announced his candidacy. Very methodical about what it was he was doing. Because the fact of the matter is that history that he was actually claiming about being on those steps had nothing to do with Obama. Because Obama is an American by his mother, not by his African or black father. And for him to stand on those steps there was a matter of deceit even at that point, because what Obama was doing was positioning himself to be immersed in a history that he could not actually claim if he was being honest, but he had checked the mood of the country out.
He was aligning himself with the Republican president all the time. All through the early stages, he was aligning himself. He took his oath of office on a Bible that had been used to swear in Lincoln. Why is he trying to connect himself to the hated party of the Republican Party? I mean, I thought that was bizarre when I heard that.
Well, you know yourself that all of the persons that were fighting for civil rights and things like that were Republicans. Now we got the Democrats claiming that was them when they were the party that was blocking those advancements. In fact, the reason why the civil rights movement is over, but just we can't recognize it because people have not gone home yet, and don't expect Sharpton and Jackson to go home anytime soon. But the reason why we have not recognized the civil rights movement is over is because those persons that are the civil rights so-called leaders today, who are nothing but race hustlers, have not packed up and gone home. But that problem is over, and it ended in 1965 when the Democrats stopped discriminating against blacks, because they can now take the credit for the passage of the Civil Rights Bill of 1965. Even in that genre, there were more Republicans that voted for it than Democrats, but they had a Democratic president that signed it, and therefore he gets all the credit. And so, I mean, because he is the president of the United States. So now then the Democrats can stop discriminating, because by doing that at this point, with Johnson being the president of the United States, the blacks are not going to run to the Republican Party they would have done which they would have done if they had stopped discriminating as a result of the Civil Rights Bill passed in 1957 under Dwight D. Eisenhower, which nobody talks about. And I'll be discussing that on King's birthday on this radio program that we're going to be doing. And I'll be talking about that because the civil rights movement is not even understood in this country by anybody. And I'm not bragging, but that's just a fact. People have not understood that movement. And I have seen no writings that have actually shown an understanding of it, of what was really the impediment that King was trying to resolve and move out of the way. It wasn't all the people of the South that were trying to move out of the way. And I was saying here, and I want to go back to this point I was making, that Obama realized that the country was not racist. Otherwise, it makes no sense for him being as far back as he was. Look at how far back he had to come to overtake the presumptive nominee of the Democratic Party, which was Hillary Clinton. Everybody knew that Hillary Clinton was the presumptive nominee of the Democratic Party. She was the one that everyone said was unstoppable. And Obama came on the 10th of February 2007 and threw his hat in the ring, where if he had been a white candidate and with his resume, he would have had no chance of overtaking Hillary Clinton. He could not have done it if he had been a white candidate, even if he had great credentials, which he didn't have great credentials. And yet he had enough confidence that he could, in fact, be the nominee of the Democratic Party. Now, how did that happen if he believes the things he's saying right now? He would never throw his hat in the ring if he believes what he's saying right now. But Obama was a different person as he presented himself. He wasn't a different person. He was a person presenting himself as a different person back in that time period. He was always this flamethrower, this racial bomb thrower, because he was... otherwise, you cannot explain how he sat in Jeremiah Rice Church for 20 years. And the reason why he's running this racial discourse right now, not that he believes it, but he wants to indict the country because he wants to fundamentally transform this country. And if he can kind of point out and keep putting in people's face how racist the country is, they're more willing to go along with the kind of changes. Anybody stand up against it, they call them racist. But that claim cannot be sustained based upon his background. He would never run. He would never cast his ballot for president in 2008 if he had believed that they would not, in fact, overlook his credentials and give him a fair chance, because we had not had an acknowledged black president before. I mean, William Clinton can claim that. I mean, he can say he's black president, but he was just playing the saxophone, had shades on. That wasn't a black president. We look at the pedigree. And Obama sufficiently believed, it wasn't based on his credentials. He had not run anything, but sufficiently believed the country was fundamentally fair, that would give him a fair chance, even more than a fair chance, because he had this resume that did not recommend anything. He was a community organizer. which is to organize a community's grievance against another community. And he threw his hat in the ring because he believed in the fundamental fairness of the American people. So he didn't believe that stuff he's talking about in Washington. He's using that as a sledgehammer.
I sum it up. He believed that he knew that Americans were suckers, so they were going to go for it. You're trying to be polite. I'm going to be succinct. The Americans are suckers to buy into it.
Yeah, but they're suckers in the sense that Americans, our strength is also our weakness. Americans want to be fair. They're fundamentally a fair people. But there is a hidden impulse in that, and that is that you can be taken for a ride. That is to say, you can be a true believer in something, but your belief can sometimes get you in trouble because you believe in fairness so much that it can come back to haunt you.
That's the reason why the left is so good at doing to the right, because the right actually has to be consistent. The left doesn't have to be consistent at all, because they don't really believe in anything.
The left is inconsistent on everything. That's why we now have Democrats claiming the perch that was once the perch set upon in the civil rights movement by the Republicans, and it still is that way. It's just that the Democrats have the noise about it, but they're able to change their political comedians. They change their appearance to fit the times. I went back to look at the suffrage of the 19th Amendment in 1920. I went back to look at who voted for that, and guess who were the ones pushing that in 1920? These were the Republicans that were pushing it, and we even had a Republican president at the time in 1920 when the amendment was passed. We're now moving toward a Republican shift in the country. Hardin would be elected in 1920. We're making a shift in the country at that time, and you look at the votes in the House and in the Senate, and you see a Republican vote that pushed those things through. But now the Republicans hate the women. And look at the vote of the blacks. There were no blacks in the South. Not a single one of the Democrats voted for the 13th Amendment except under the hammer. That was a part of them being allowed back into the Union at that point, because the so-called radical Republicans, radical because they wanted to bring the former slaves into full union with the United States, which made them quote-unquote radical. And you look at the ones who brought them there, made them heal, as a way of getting back into the Union. You had to ratify the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, which was to end slavery, then to bestow citizenship on the former slaves, and then stop discriminating in terms of voting based upon race, color, national origin, or previous condition of servitude. All of that was, in fact, Republican-based. But now the Democrats are claiming that is their heritage. And I heard Rango talking about that in New York. This man is mad if he believes the things he's saying. But I don't think they believe this. I think that in fact, I know they don't believe it. They're selling us a narrative because that's what the left is. The left is disingenuous on everything, and they're willing to change the narrative of history if they have to maintain power. But it didn't work this time, and I was glad when the last of the Mohicans was thrown out, and that was Mary Landrieu down there in Louisiana. What she's she actually came out, and this was just unbelievable that she would do this, because she came out and said that the South hates women and hates the president because he's black and all that. And this woman had been elected 3 different times, that's a total of 18 years, as the senator representing Louisiana, and she's going to come out as a Johnny-come-lately and try to pull a narrative that this was about hate because she's trailing in the polls. And it wasn't about her leadership. Well, they weren't buying that, and that's something that she was trying to get by that narrative. It didn't work this time. They threw out of there.
Oh, you know what, though? I always when the Democrats always rant about people hating them because they don't like what they're pushing for. You know, the thought come to my head: wouldn't a person facing an execution squad hate the riflemen? You know, I'm serious. He would hate them. I'm sorry, but yeah. I mean, they go on about hate, this emotion, and that just goes to show you their centeredness. It's on emotions, not upon facts. Not upon rational thought, upon emotions. Mm-hmm. They go for that quickly. They hate you. You know what? I don't know how. It's an impossible thing to be friends with the leftists, because if you don't accept and become them, they're not going to like you.
I reject the left. I reject it in total and unseen. A person got on my wall yesterday. I had written an article. I knew it was provocative because I was not drinking Obama's Kool-Aid. And I said that we'll be rid of this administration in a little more than 2 years from now, and they should have their bags packed on the 19th, not on the 20th of January 2017, because this country is tired of what these people are bringing to the table on the notion of race. And this guy got on my wall, one of my former students who think I'm going to tolerate their madness. And Ms. Moss, you taught Black history. I sure did, and I taught it very well too. And but they think they're gonna teach me now. Yeah, that's laughable. And I had to get him straight, and I told him to get off my wall. No, he'll get back on my wall again. And when he didn't get off my wall, I blocked him, because I tell you what I'm doing right now. I am not going to tolerate fools in my space, and there are some people you cannot save. And I'm not going to spend my time trying to do it. This boat is only going to have so many people in it. And you're going to have to understand a narrative in the Bible. Now they let the dead bury the dead. You simply try to, in fact, put some information out there, and those that do not take a bite. I mean, that's the Noah story, isn't it, in terms of you tell them that it's going to rain, and if they don't believe it, that's not your fault if they don't get in the boat or build one for themselves. That's on them. And when I see people getting on my wall and saying to me, but you taught Black history and you're against this Black president and blah, 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 all you do is blah, blah, blah. Didn't tell me one thing I said that was wrong, by the way. You know, I do the research before I write my articles. In fact, it takes me longer to do the research than it does to write the articles. After I do the research, I then start to write, and the words just kind of, you know, I'm a word smith. I don't want to brag, but I don't have a problem putting words together in writing. I'm better in writing than I am in speaking it. And I try to, when I teach from notes. I can kind of have my notes together. But I mean, you can go off, but you simply have to have a format, and I have to have a format when I'm teaching. But in writing, I can sit there and my sentences would come, and the narration is pretty easy for me. Most of the time is my research to do the piece. Once I've done the research, then writing it is not going to take that long. And when they get on my wall and tell me that that because you taught Black history, you can't criticize Obama, I'm ready to start calling some names here. But I'm in a family. People that read my posts are like family people. And I don't want to shock anybody at teeth, and I'm not a profane person anyway. But it might make you want to use some words on them, because I'm not going to tolerate anybody to come on my wall telling me about we had you in Black history class and you taught Black history. I said, so what? I'm teaching Black history right now, and I'm saying this man needs to go. That's Black history. We need the first Black president to get out of here. That's Black history. So I mean, when I talked about the slave masters, everything I said about those slave masters was true, and I didn't make up one word of it. I was quoting from the text. But I got to tell you this: there's not any person in America today, not one, who has ever been a slave in this country, and most of them will recognize cotton unless they put it in a medicine bottle, because that's where it is right now. And they want to run this narrative that I'm not going to buy and have never bought, that this is about racism. That is about Michael Brown's about racism, and Eric Garner's about racism. And I got the article right here where it says General Giant dies after the NYPD cop puts him in chokehold, and they never once said in the article that he was choked. And I read the autopsy report; he wasn't choked. That's just people being led. They can't read between the lines because they're not, because I taught the history, and I thought I taught some people to think out there, but apparently not all of them. And I see a lot of that, where they can't read between the lines. You can call this a restraining hold, but the press chose to call it a chokehold. And the people are so dense and dumb, deaf, dumb, and blind, that they can't understand how they're being manipulated. They didn't even put in the article anywhere Not any of the articles out there, and I read all the articles out there, and they didn't say one time that he was choked. You know why? Because what they were doing is getting rid of liability. You know, they haven't read the books by Wilson Bryan Key, and I have, all 3 volumes of it. Every word in those 3 volumes, including the date and time it was copyrighted. And so they're going to come on my wall and teach me. I'm offended by that. Because I'll tell you right now, there's not a student that I had. And I had some pretty good ones. And one of them is at Harvard University. I don't have a student yet that can come back and teach me anything, because I didn't stop reading then. In fact, that's a problem that black people have with thinking that they're falling behind because of racism. They say, well, we're falling further and further behind in this modern time, which shows racism still exists. The reason you're falling further and further behind is because whites didn't stop just because you began to catch up. They moved from where they were and kept moving. That's that. If they stayed where they were, you would have closed that gap. But that gap has been changed because they continue to move forward. Not standing in place waiting for you to catch up. People continue to move, and you got to move also. And you're moving, but you're moving your lips. You're not moving your hands. And once you understand how the process works and stop victimizing yourself, you'll find out what I already know, and that is the civil rights movement is over. And it ended 3 years before King was assassinated, which I'm going to say that on the 16th on this radio program, because that's not understood. Let me just say another thing since we're talking about Obama, because you think you'll come on my wall and teach me something. You got to be kidding. You got to be joking. And that's all. And by the way, all of y'all put your knowledge together out there. You're my former student. I'm talking to them. I love them to death, but I tell you right now, I'm offended if you come on my wall and think you're gonna you read some books when you were in my classroom. You probably read anything since that time period. I didn't stop reading at that time. But let me say this to you. If you think that the civil rights movement is what caused Obama to be president of the United States, I can tell you right now that's not true. You go back and look at that chart in 2008 when Obama was elected. I think all of you will agree that the civil rights movement took place in the South, and Dr. King did almost all of his work in the South. He did some things in Chicago, went to Cleveland, did some things, but basically his movement was rooted in the South. And in a few places there, because he was trying to get it at the place where it was most horrific, and then the other walls will come tumbling down, which is the book that Ralph Abernathy wrote when he named his book, And the Walls Came Tumbling Down. If you can get the walls down in Birmingham, then the domino effect kicks in. You go to Mississippi, then the domino effect kicks in. So he went to these places where there was more rigidity, and the idea was that if you can collapse the house of cards over there, then it would take place elsewhere. But go back and look at the election of 2008 and look at the electoral votes in the South. Obama didn't carry the South. Those Confederate states didn't vote for Obama, and it wasn't because of racism. They didn't vote for Obama because by the time Obama ran for election, the South has become Republican. And that right there ends the narrative that this guy got, Eric Holder, who's not worth 2 dead flies. I'll be glad when he leaves. And let's hurry up and confirm Loretta Lynch in his place, because this man needs to go. Not that she's going to be a great improvement, and we won't make an improvement until you begin to put people in those positions, like this guy named David over here in, what's David's last name? David Clark, over here in Milwaukee County, who is the county sheriff over there. I just heard him on the way to the studio today. He was on the Rush Limbaugh show, and this guy is one of the shining lights out there, and makes plenty of sense. You'll never see him being appointed by these persons on the left, because they don't want healing on the left. They want the friction on the left. That's what Obama wants. He doesn't want any racial healing in this country. And anytime you have Al Sharpton in there, I'm going to tell you right now, you don't need to tell me anything about anything else about the person. If you got Al Sharpton in a room and you're talking about race as an issue and Sharpton's in there, you're not about racial healing. I don't need to know anything else about what you're talking about in that room. And David Clark would never be in that room. Yet Sheriff Clark should be in that room because he's the only one out there on the national landscape that's making any sense. Nobody on the left makes any sense. The narrative on the left is wrong. Everybody on the left is wrong. And I would even go so far to say this, and I know this is going to get a lot of people to get on my wall. I'm going to get you off the wall too. And that is, everybody on the left is psychotic. You cannot be a black liberal on the left and not be a psychotic, because the left has an indictment. Its narrative is where the racism is. As I said in my post today, that, which by the way, every point I made is 4 pages long. I write the longest narratives on Facebook. My narrative is 4 pages long. There is not one claim I made in those 4 pages that any scholar in this country can come up against. And if those scholars are out there in Facebook land or in the reach of this voice of this program, I dare you to get on that wall. So you think you got something there. What you are affirmative action scholars. All of you new scholars that got those PhD degrees, you are affirmative action scholars. And most of you, I read some of your stuff. Most of you can't even write. And you're going to be in for a rude awakening. That's what's going to happen. You're not going to get on the wall because you know what you do. In fact, some of you, when I first came down to the university, and I was writing on the post that you have for the black scholars, and I was writing on the wall, and at first they were printing everything I wrote, and it was in the magazines and all that, and you were doing that. Then you begin to say, wait a minute, this guy's not sounding like a parrot. And then I can call the name out, the guy down here in Ohio, down here in Dayton, who's the publisher of that. And they stopped printing my stuff, and people started writing me offline. They were asking, who are you? And they were saying this to me, quite frankly, they were saying, we can't, they wanted to know if I was having problems in my department, which I wasn't. And they said we believe the things you're saying. We accept what you're saying, but we can't say that. And I know that that's true because I know the person that there was a 60s radical that came in, and he's in the Black Studies department. I forget his name right now. The one that wrote the book, the one that was where Feelings was the illustrator of the book. What's the name of that book? Anyway, he changed his mind, came out of the radical left, and was actually positioned himself differently in the classroom. And they told him in the Black Studies department, you get this guy out of this department, we're going to kill him. And that guy had to go in the English department in that particular school. I can't think of his name right now, but I know his history very, very well. There is a fascism in the Black Studies department where there's a lockstep sentiment that you have to toe the line, and they were writing me offline telling me they agree with me, but they could not say this in public. Well, I say it in public, and I dare any of these scholars to get in public. You're not going to do it because you're not going to do it. You're not going to do it. You better not do it. I challenge you to do it. You're a bunch of airheads. And that includes all of you out there on the left. You don't know anything. And you're affirmative action scholars. I read your stuff. Michael Eric Dyson, for example, he didn't know anything. Has a book out called The Real, I've been to the, I've been to the mountaintop, I have a dream, something like that, and he writes about the real Dr. Martin Luther King. You can't find Dr. King in that book. And this other guy that I had lunch with, Manny Marable, he's deceased right now, and that doesn't stop me from making a critique of him. I said with Manny Marable, the one who wrote the book on Malcolm X called Reinventing, where he talks about Malcolm X reinventing himself. Well, Manny Marable reinvented another Malcolm X. The one he didn't put in that book doesn't exist. And I had lunch with him, and we were sitting down talking. He telling me about this. I told him I agree with Bell Hooks in her book called Killing Rage, and I agree with her that there's no such thing as black orthodoxy, which you can't tell these airheads. There's no point of view that all black folks have. Black people are just as diverse as anybody is, And you can go in the world and see that. You can't find 5 blacks on the continent of Africa and buy this African American nonsense. And you over here in this part of the world, and you never been to Africa, and you're gonna say Africa, and nobody in Africa believes that stuff. Only 5 black people you can probably find on the whole continent accepts that nonsense. And they want to make it. Manny Marable wanted to make it appear that there's some black orthodoxy, some point of view that all black folks supposed to have. When I sat there with him, and he told me he disagreed with bell hooks, and he was saying, well, there is a black orthodoxy, and I leaned into him real close, got close to his face. I almost could have given him a smack on his jaw. I mean, give him a smooch if I roll that way, which I don't. But I got so close to him, I went over there and I wanted to make sure that he understood that of the indignity that I was feeling about what he had said. So I leaned into him and I said, give me an example. And he got up there, he was a guest speaker, he got up there on the microphone and said, I was at this table over here, you doggone straight you were at that table over there, and I wasn't buying your nonsense, telling me that there's a thought, a single thought that 50 million people in this country ought to be carrying. Because he came out of that school, that fascist school. The left is both fascist and racist, and you can't be. And I'll say this: nobody said this, and I put it in my post, and nobody's gonna challenge it because they know the better than I get on my wall. Because you didn't challenge it, because what you did when I was writing on that, inside that, in that circle, what you did, quite frankly, is that you posted and you posted and you posted. What you stopped doing when you couldn't. You never challenged anything. What you did was stop posting. And I wrote this one guy down there in Ohio, and I told him, get my name off your mailing list and do it now. Well, he didn't want to do that because now I'm calling him on his fascism, and they don't want to admit they're not open to all ideas. They want to have these ideas, not those ideas. And he didn't want to take my name off. I kept telling him, you will get my name off that mailing list, and you will stop sending me these articles, and you'll do it now. And he wrote and talked about on the private, he was sorry and blah, blah. I'm sorry, nothing. You get my name off that list. And he did that after some prodding. They thought I was going to accept this fascism that's on the left, where all of you have to be in lockstep. And if you don't agree with this point of view, that's the going rate. This is the concept, and it came from the mountaintop. You got to believe that. I don't believe any of it, and I don't believe what you're saying about Egypt either. And I'm better at that than you are. And when I was writing about this one against out here in California, this airhead, they got mad. He thought he wanted to say, "Well, send me some of your writings," and I sent him some of my writings, and then he shut up. Some of the things I published inside the university, and I got a book coming out next year. They're not gonna publish it, but I'm gonna send it to them. But I don't think they're gonna print it.
What's the book about?
It's a lot of my narratives I've been writing, and all of it is I got 2 unpublished books, but they're not gonna publish me. I'm writing I'm writing on matters of race and trying to say some things that the left does not want to hear, and these publishing houses.
How about Regency? They publish a lot of books by conservatives and and libertarians too, somewhat.
I'm gonna send it to that company then, because I would like to get this one published, because I think this one is going to set another. It's going to just put another paradigm out there that's not out there right now. Because I have to be honest with you. Like the article I wrote today, nobody said the things I said in an article today, and everything that I said in an article, and I said brace, because we're going where nobody has gone before, and that's true. Nobody's gone there before. Nobody said the points that I made in that article today, and that is the going rate. But I have a book that I wrote some years ago called I took it off from James Herndon's book, The Way It's Supposed to Be. And I had one called The Way It Is. And that book was about 300 and some odd pages. It didn't go anywhere. The guy that was my agent was telling me he's showing it here and showing it there. I guess when I was over showing him the money, he wasn't showing it to anybody. But I'm going to try to, but next year, I got to stop, doing so much running around, and spend some time to work on putting this book in publishing form. I'm going to send it off and see what happens to it. And if it doesn't get published, no, I'm not going to hurt my feelings. But I would like to get this one published because I think this one is going to set a different paradigm out there.
Maybe be self-published. I mean, Nabokov did that for his first works, and now he's considered a literary genius with Lolita and all those other books, he wrote. And I don't know if you know much about him, but he was a phenomenal writer. English was his third or fourth language. He was born in Russia, and he could speak Russian, French, and English, I think it was. But yeah, he's an amazing writer, and he self-published and put it out there himself. So that might be an option for you.
Yeah, John, I'll tell you something about I try to. I have a background where I try to sell some encyclopedias. I was waiting until my job came in teaching, and I had the summertime to try to earn some money. And I was working with this one group that went from door to door trying to sell encyclopedias. And this guy was marvelous. I'm studying under this guy. This guy could sell, ice water at the North Pole. And he was just that good. So I'm studying under this guy and trying to learn his technique. But I go in there and I start talking fast and I get nervous. I couldn't sell water in the Sahara Desert. So if I'm going to be published, I'm going to have to go with a publisher that can push the book themselves. Because if I try to sell it on my own, I mean, I'm gonna go up to a person. Then he's gonna say, "What do you want?" I'm gonna say, "I just want to know if the guy next door is home." That's kind of the way I am about selling. But I am serious about it being published. But I'm serious about everything I'm doing. I'm not playing out here, and I'm serious about what I'm trying to do, and I'm serious about trying to say some things out here that's going to put us on a different road, a pathway, because we're on a pathway right now to destruction. If we're listening to people like Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson and Eric Holder, and Obama and Michelle Obama. I was reading some stuff they wrote in People magazine. That stuff didn't make any sense. I mean, what they were complaining about in People magazine, this issue just came out. They're complaining about the racism in the country that Obama could not believe in, because look what he did in 2007 and how he became president in 2008. Which the civil rights movement didn't cause that, because Obama didn't win the South where King was. What won the election for Obama was the American people wanted to be fundamentally fair with a person that they perceived was a former, the great grandson of a grandson, if you will, or whatever, of former slaves, which he never was that. His father's over in Kenya. If he wants to have a dream over there, that'll be in Kenya somewhere. He's American because of his mother. His mother's not black.
I called the people in Kenya. They said, "No, don't you dare send him over our way."
They don't want him over there either. Well, we don't want him in the presidency after 2017, and he'll be gone. But if he believed that, he would not have run for president, and that's just a going rate. Well, anyway, make a long story short, we are the fundamental fairness of America is what got this guy president. And he's up here complaining in People magazine about someone took him as a valet before he became well known. He's outside of a high price restaurant or some kind of place, maybe a hotel or something, that high place. Not too many blacks would probably frequent, and they see him outside. He's got to wear a nice suit and that, and they assume that he is a valet. He's offended by that today. Michelle is offended, according to the article, because she's in a store. She's 5'10" in the stocking feet. And a white woman that's shorter than she was asked her if she could reach a package on the top shelf. Now she's a maid, where back then slaves ringing the bell because it's time for more tea for the slave master. And she's a maid in the house now. There's a cotton field because of that conversation. And that's the racism that they found. And then they got this narrative with Eric Garner and Michael Brown. You won't believe this as we close out, but in those two cases, the case with Eric Garner took place July the 16th of 2014, and Michael Brown was August the 9th. July and August, and we're still talking about it 4 months later. Why? Because we ain't got nothing else. And yet that's supposed to be showing all this racism in the country. Okay, I'm got to get out of here. I got carried away, as always. But read the post that I did today, and I think you'll be enlightened by what we wrote. And I want you to always follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.